Bright day, and for us it is another time to make sure that we contribute our quota to make Nigeria good, and that means from this end we will be showcasing a lot of things that will not only entertain, educate, but thoroughly inform us and help us get to the next level when it comes to greatness. My name is Elizabeth Abai, and the program is Weekend Deal, reaching you from the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, when we speak of a problem, it is not because we just want to talk, it's because we want answers. But a lot of times it's easy to sit where you are and wonder, why is this not doing well? What is not happening? And what should have been done? We often do not put ourselves in the shoes of the other person we judge. Francis Ogbuena Bagranda went around and tried to find out the challenges of the power sector. Let's see what he brought forward.
Once upon a time in Nigeria, whenever there will be power outage, rest assured the public will be notified of areas to be affected and at what time. But today, while some Nigerians cannot boast of uninterrupted power supply for 1 week, others acknowledge the fact that there has been an improvement in power supply in some areas across the country.
In 2014, there's this World Bank report that showed that 25% of businesses in this country identified insufficient electricity as their major stumbling block in having running a successful business. So you can see, if 25% of businesses are complaining that they lack sufficient power, so which means our economy is going to be affected largely. And if you look at it there's another report that showed that Nigerians annually spend about 4.5 billion annually on the importation of generators, and they spend additional 2.9 billion in powering those generating sets. So you can see that's a very huge, there's a huge amount of money being wasted. When you used to struggle between 6 and 5 hours, now you're having 12 hours. Of course, you call that an improvement. But if you make comparison with other countries, even in Africa, you realize that we're not doing as expected. As a giant of Africa with our population, we ought to have done better than what we're doing.
In 2013, two segments of Nigeria's power sector, generation and distribution, were privatized to resolve the challenges associated with the proud monopoly of government in power generation, transmission and distribution. However, privatization only changed the dimension of the challenges, and power supply remains largely inadequate, unaffordable and unreliable in the country.
One of the major issues raised by the World Bank and other financial institutions is the regularization of these sectors, especially power. So that ought to have, like I said, it ought to have solved our energy problem a long time ago. But the process that led to the privatization of the power sector has been fraught with a lot of irregularities. We've seen what happened during the last regime. Just people that were not even ready for businesses were being hurriedly brought in. And the whole process was marred with a lot of irregularities. It became an issue of political patronage. Those in offices were looking at ways in which they could help their political associates, some even family members. I know of a particular disco, that's a distribution company. I would not mention the name, that was being run by a family. And these are people that do not have any kind of idea or any kind of knowledge of running a 21st century energy sector.
Vandalism has been identified as one of the causes of Nigeria's poor power supply. If this is tackled by relevant security agencies, the country's electricity generating capacity would increase tremendously.
We need what we call community reorientation. Now, people need to understand that if you vandalize a public property, it's as if you are vandalizing your own system too, because one way or the other, it will affect you, or it will affect someone you know. So it has to do with, we have a lot of agencies that should do that. We have community leaders, religious leaders that should educate people. But largely, government must take the bigger blame, because it must be able to take measures on how to protect your own properties against vandalism.
Nigeria receives huge amount of solar radiation, has abundant wind energy resources and large deposit of fossil fuel, as well as enormous hydropower resources from Niger and Benue rivers. However, about 80% of hydropower remains untapped. The total 5.5 kilowatt of solar radiation is not utilized, and wind energy resources remain unexploited.
The most developed Western economies depend on nuclear energy. But sadly, in this part of the world, or in our own country, I don't think we're ready for that. So I know there's a nuclear research commission in Ahmadu Bello University's area, but up to this moment, since its establishment, nothing has been heard of it. So it's just one of those elephant project, I would call it, that government is always pursuing. But of course, if we are serious, if you go to Katsina, there's Katsina windmill that was initiated by the late President Umaru Yar'Adua when he was governor. It's abandoned in there. You see all the implements, but they are not harnessing it. I was told reliably by professionals that particular wind farm at Katsina could power like 6 or 7 states in northwest Nigeria. That's you are reducing the pressure on the hydropower in Kainji and other power stations we have in the country. Apart from that, you must make use of the energy that is peculiar to your own environment. We have sun. Why can't we make use of the solar energy? We allow the Chinese to come here and invest in that solar energy. A lot of people will go to China, buy solar panel, buy battery, and they power their homes. I know of a lot of homes that are off the grid, or they're not using electricity from all these discos. They have their independent source of energy, which is solar. So why can't government come in fully to invest in this alternative source of energy?
According to the Nigerian Power Sector Recovery Program, our erratic power supply results in more than $25 billion in annual losses to the economy. More than 60% of gross domestic product and 80% of Nigerian businesses cite electrification challenges as the most significant obstacle to doing business. Our focus on Weekend Deal today will be on the challenges of power supply in Nigeria and the way forward.
Quite detailed, and we'll be speaking more on that as we converse with our guests in a while. But before we do that, something came up yesterday and Suleiman picked it immediately. That's rural electrification. Let's go find out what he did.
Lack of access to energy supply constitutes a major developmental issue in rural communities globally, particularly in Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Despite increase in the percentage of people with access to electricity globally, supply in Nigeria has constantly remained insufficient, ranging between 3,500 megawatts to little above 4,000 megawatts. The electricity need for developing countries was estimated at about 1,000 megawatts per million people. Nigeria's population is over 200 million, a mismatch in demand and supply. The situation is worse for rural communities, and they constitute up to 50% of the Nigerian population.
The problem of lack of access is not one that you tackle in bits. It has to be done holistically. You look at it from the angle of regulation, relevant regulation in place, which this government has provided through the mini-grid regulation that allows for smaller players to come in.
We have the Rural Electrification Fund, where the primary concern with that is that how do we use that fund to ensure that we are working closely with the private sector, and that fund is acting like a gap funding, if you like, to make that power affordable.
Globally, rural electrification policies are shaped according to various energy needs, resources, and target groups, as well as the challenges and anticipated benefits to the individual rural communities.
For us, we are not just looking at connecting electrons to households for the sake of getting electricity for only lighting and charging. But we're looking at the productive user angle and the economic benefits that comes to the community. That's why one of our criteria is to make sure that, yes, you are connecting to households, but what are those businesses or potential businesses that could also crop up and generate employment and income for those communities, so that they can remain comfortably in their rural communities and forget about migrating or thinking of some sort of vice to pick up because there's no job or there.
Providing an enabling environment for the private sector is critical to achieving off-grid electrification strategy in the country.
We have been able to ensure that we are providing the enabling environment for private sector to come in, make the necessary investments to ensure that these projects continue to be sustainable, and even within even within projects that we are doing within REA in the capital budget, we have recently launched a sustainability model around it, where in Cross River State we now have a mini grid where we have had a tripartite agreement between ourselves, the developer, and the community to ensure that that power continues to provide, or we continue to provide that power as a service to rural dwellers.
Today, Rural Electrification Agency continue to connect communities via solar mini-grids, deployment of solar home systems, solar street lights, provision of substations, and grid extension across all 6 geopolitical zones. This is just scratching the surface, knowing fully that many communities are still unserved, as experts believe more funds are needed, despite the intervention from World Bank, African Development Bank, and Rural Electrification Fund.
Because of competing government priorities, it's not always easy to have access to all the money that you require. But moving forward, we are looking to how, our Rural Electrification Fund can become a lot more sustainable. So we are working with various partners within government to see how that fund will continue to grow, to see how we can make that fund attractive.
Electricity for me is the most important commodity in this country. And if we can have other sustainable sources of funding for other sectors like education, which is equally important, petroleum industry, which is equally important, ecological fund, which is equally important. But why can't we have for electricity for rural people? We are number 1 currently in the world without access.
Some say President Buhari's commitment to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty can easily be achieved if the energy gap is bridged, most especially in the rural areas.
I actually enjoy being in the village. Electricity or no electricity, the place has this natural ambience of, peace, tranquility. But then I know when electricity is added, it's even more fun. So I told you someone will be answering a lot of questions you've been sending, via WhatsApp and text message handle. And he's seated right here with me. He's the MD and CEO of Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company. And he's Nemeka Ewelokwa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate coming on the program.
Okay. Now, a lot of people are possibly just hearing about your company for the first time. I'd like you to speak a little bit about it.
The Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC was incorporated as a company in 2010 and started operation in 2011. Under the Power Sector Reform Act, Section 25, there's provision for, as part of the reform process, for a licensee of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission tasked with the responsibility of functioning as a middleman in the electricity market, essentially buying electricity from power generation companies and selling electricity to power distribution companies. This is envisaged as a transitional entity that will work pending when there's confidence in the market that facilitates bilateral trading between generation companies and distribution companies. In a nutshell, that's what we do.
Okay, so the company is not like is a permanent feature for the electricity generation, company.
No, it's not designed to be a permanent feature of electricity market.
Okay.
But it was at the time, as part of the reform process, the government knew that there would be a period of time within which it would take for the market to mature. And so if you look at what is called the market rules, the market rules provides for a phased reform agenda for the government. And that phased reform starts with what is called the pre-transitional period. And this was a time prior to privatization when you had different government agencies, NEPA, etc., working. However, we now moved into what is called the transitional stage of the electricity market, which actually commenced 1st February 2015. And the next phase of market development is called the medium-term market. And effectively, the difference between where we are and where we're heading to is that where we are is defined by bilateral contracts. But of course, even with bilateral contracts, there's the understanding that the distribution companies were not yet in a position to fully pay for the power being purchased. And so the government stands as an intermediary in the middle to manage the payment gap effectively, and to also ensure that limited generation is channeled across the entire country. But of course, with growing competition, with increase in generation, with increased viability of distribution companies, the intention in terms of the market rules is that you get to a point where that sort of role of government in, you may call it a midwife kind of role, actually starts to phase, because the parties are now strong enough to actually trade bilaterally.
Okay, that's a good one. Now, when you talked about increased generation, increased that, as a layman, the only thing I'm thinking about, do I have lights? Well, how much are we generating? How much are we distributing? I'd like to know.
Based on data, the current peak demand in terms of demand for electricity in the country, based on data from the transmission company, is around 28,000 megawatts. In terms of the contracted capacity of power, it's around 13,000 megawatts. What is actually, in terms of generation capacity at the moment, based on data from TCN, that is about 7,600 megawatts. And the current peak demand, peak generation, that is the highest peak ever attained in the history of a country, is about 5,800 megawatts. Now, of course, that's a one-time hit. What is actually available on a, let's say, within the past 2-3 days, the peak is about 4,007.
That's a good one. Now, I'd like to know, Nigerian government, they're supposed to provide security for investments like the put call option agreements, partial risk guarantee for investors that invested in the power sector in the year 2013. Privatization exercise as done for Azura and the rest of them. How has Nigerian government played their role in this?
The government has shown absolute commitment to this power sector, and nothing defines that more than if you look at the financial interventions that have gone into the power sector over the past couple of years, starting from the Nigerian Electricity Market Stabilization Facility of about 2014 to the Payment Assurance Facility. That was a 213 billion facility. Then you move to 2017, you had the Payment Assurance Facility, 701 billion. And then 2019, that facility was expanded by an additional 600 billion. And let's keep in mind that when the government is making these sorts of interventions, it's also to ensure that as the reform is being implemented, the financial impact is not felt by the citizens immediately.
Yes.
And so government says, from a social point of view, it's critical to ensure that whilst we do these reforms, it's also important to ensure that the citizens are not suddenly hit by this massive rise in tariff. So that's part of why you have that sort of intervention to cushion the effects of the reforms, even whilst a lot of things are happening in the background. So I would say that the federal government has shown absolute commitment to actually facilitating the development of the sector.
We'll continue on that because I'm interested in the 22 investors earlier. But for now, let's move on to Lagos, precisely the ETV, and find out the issue of estimated bill ETV packaged this.
In Nigeria, the electricity demand far outstrips the supply, and the supply is epileptic in nature.
We didn't normally have light, and they're bringing crazy bill for us. And if we did not pay the money, then we cut our light.
According to record, Lagos State alone harbors about 60% of the Federation's total industrial investment and foreign trade, but the unstable electricity and estimated billing have made the economy tough for Lagosians.
If you pay 30,000 naira this month, the next month, prepare to pay 60, if not 70. As you are paying it, prepare to add another one. And when you go to the office and complain, they will say about it, and nothing they will do.
The prepaid meter they are bringing, by the time you buy a card of 15,000, within 1 week it is finished. They will now tell you that they have increased the tariff of the prepaid meter. So we don't know where we are going in this country.
Despite the privatization policy on power sector and efforts made by the two DISCOs, a co-distribution company and Ikeja distribution company in Lagos State, people are still faced with the electricity problems, especially in the area of estimated billing. However, at the compilation of this report, we couldn't get correspondence from the two DISCOs, but the crew caught up with an expert in energy distribution.
What most DISCOs do is that they look at the historical consumption of those customers and now use that to judge, but that is not the way it's supposed to be, because there is a situation where a customer in that particular month in question, that customer must have actually traveled, and you are just giving him based on the history. You are looking at his what he has been consuming before. So you are not actually billing him based on his actual consumption.
The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission (NEC), a body in charge of electric power sector, states in its Act of 2005 that all customers have a right to transparent electricity billing. So one wonder why customers should be given estimated bill.
All the electricity customers in Nigeria presently not all of them are metered. Majority of the customers are not metered presently. More than 50% of the electricity customers are not metered. So, and there is no any other way you can actually give them bill other than to estimate them.
With a widespread of complaints against estimated billing, which is still not eradicated, and installed meters as at date.
The solution to it is to meter everybody. If you are not metering everybody, ensure that whatever estimate you are giving them actually reflect their consumption.
The insufficient funding, changes in fiscal policy, inflation, and among others, which have been a major constraint in electricity supply, the DISCOs companies and government should put more effort in circulating prepaid meters in order to make electricity affordable and accessible to all.
Okay, we're still in the studio with Dr. Nemeka Ewelukwa, and we're still talking about how to ensure that we have enough of what we desire in a lot of ways, most to function as a nation. That's electricity. You talked about investment, and I'm kind of interested in knowing what has happened to the 22 investors that indicated interest in renewable energy. That's around 2015. And how has the pricing of renewable energy affected the investments in renewable energy off-grid and on-grid in Nigeria?
NBET, thank you very much for that question. NBET purchases electricity for the grid, essentially. And NBET signed a number of power purchase agreements back in 2016, July, August of 2016. And NBET is still working with those investors to see how we can realize, get to the finish line. Effectively, when you look at renewable energy, it's something that is critical for a number of purposes. In the first place, it's important from an energy security point of view to have a diverse energy mix. And so having renewable energy, particularly in the northern part of the country, it helps a lot from an energy diversification point of view, as well as grid stability, making sure that you have electricity coming from the farthermost end of the country. And so it's a work in progress. The government, of course, has a commitment within the context of the Paris Agreement in terms of a carbon emission reduction. And so these are some of the considerations in NBT's quest to ensure that we, as part of our negotiation of power purchase agreements that will incentivize new power generation in the country, we want to be sure that we have a fine balance of both fossil fuel as well as renewable energy, knowing that renewable energy is the way for the future.
Okay, I'm really interested in knowing what NBET is doing to enhance Nigerian energy transition through pricing, tariff, and other incentive. Could you speak more on that?
Effectively, what we are doing in terms of, we negotiate power purchase agreements.
Okay.
And when you negotiate those power purchase agreements, there are a number of considerations. First of all, you're looking at the investment you're about to unlock in the country in terms of foreign direct investment that comes into the country. But also you're looking at the issue of the tariff at which you sell power to the country. The regulator, of course, regulates tariff. And part of what the regulator has requested of NBT is that in finalizing power purchase agreement, that NBT should also engage the discos, since we actually sell power to them, engage them and make sure that we have their buy-in in purchasing the power, because we don't buy to keep, we buy to sell.
Instantly.
And so a disco is also looking at if I am buying this power from NBT, is it better for me to buy from NBT or perhaps to enter into an agreement for what is called embedded generation? What
does that mean?
Embedded generation essentially means a generation company that injects power into a local distribution network as opposed to the grid.
Okay.
And so ultimately it's a pricing decision. Do you buy from the grid, or do you get into an agreement with someone that will build a power plant within your disco franchised area? And so pricing, of course, is a critical consideration in that context.
When you started, you talked about you being there, not permanently. As it were, if I had the resources and way without, can I at the moment begin to do what you're doing? Maybe with time, other people can come in if I want to, as at today, because I know that as at now, you're still fully federal government. I'm talking about private person coming in to compete with you in your job.
Ultimately, it's for the regulator to take a view as to where we are in terms of market development. The critical thing to note about this power sector is that the reforms are not random. The reforms are being done in accordance with the Electric Power Sector Reform Act 2005 and the market rules that regulate the transition from one phase to another. And so what is important is that at any point in time that there is a review of where we are. Where are you in terms of what are the critical defining features that when you see those features, you'll be able to say that the market has advanced to the point where perhaps there can be the other traders like you pointed out. But ultimately, it's about looking at the reforms, looking at the characteristics that define progress, and being able to make a decision on that.
All right, before we go, I'd like to maybe visit some of the people writing in. Let's see, somebody wrote in. It says, the letter of credit provided by distribution companies to secure vesting contracts, are they still in place, and what is the update?
The letters of credit are in place. What NBT did back in 2016 was to pull the different letters of credit that different distribution companies provided to NBT, pull them into a security trust deed arrangement, which is being administered by the UBA Capital trustees. So they are in place. But the goal, of course, is that ultimately you get to the point where tariffs become cost reflective. At that point, government intervention now wouldn't be necessary again, because by that time it means that what power that is supplied on a monthly basis, that the discos that purchase the power will be able to make full payment for that.
All right, thank you very much. I wish I had more time. I still have several questions. Probably we'll find a way of sending to you, so you give me answers and I pass back. But we just have to continue. Thank you. We've been speaking with the MD and CEO of the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company in the person of Dr. Nnemeka Ewelukwa. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on your program.
And we will be going to Jos now, but that's virtual going. Let's find our state of electricity and power there.
Electricity generation, transmission and distribution are capital intensive, which requires huge resources of good funds and capacity.
Jos Electricity Distribution Company covers supply to 4 states of the Federation, Nigeria. That is Plateau, Benue, Bauchi, and Gombe states. Plateau state alone takes 38% of that amount. So that is the remaining 64% that we share to.
In Nigeria, the power sector was privatized in November 2013. And in Plateau State, the Jos Electricity Distribution Company and National Electric Signaling Company are the energy providers for consumers of electricity. In Jos Metropolis, Jos Electricity Distribution Company has taken steps to re-establish trust with their customers by distributing prepaid meters for accurate measure of customers' electricity consumption.
These meters are free. They are free. And they should not be paid for. And secondly, under the National Mass Metering Program that is being funded by the federal government and through CBN, the metering deployment has been broken into phases. Now, what we are doing now is what we call phase 0, that is ground zero. What will we do first to stabilize supply availability? So in Jos Electricity Distribution, we needed to have about 109,000 meters out of 663,000 customers that we have.
Many consumers, however, continue to ground over estimated billings as demand for prepaid meters from the distribution companies are not met.
People should exercise special. We are coming to everybody. It's free, so it will come, no doubt. And then all things being equal, everybody will be captured.
The average electricity consumer has no clue and knowledge of how charges are calculated, leaving the consumers of electricity at the receiving end of billing.
But to be very frank, the issue of the billing system is the one that is most worrisome to us.
We discovered that they ration the lights 2 days, and the 3rd day they will take it. And when it is our turn, especially our own face, when it is our turn, we don't see the light. But when it is almost time to bring bills, they will release the light. We start enjoying the light.
We spend more than what ought to be in a month. And I suppose that would not be okay for an average earner. You know, if one has to spend over 6,000 a month on power usage, which may not be very stable, but then the money is that much, it may be beyond the reach of the average Nigerian.
The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission is the body responsible for enforcing electricity laws and regulations. Criminalizing estimated billing will go a long way in changing the status quo, in promoting and ensuring transparency, fairness and justice for electricity consumers in Nigeria.
Whatever we do, Nigerians say they want light. But as we talk about light, we also talk about a lot of things. One of them is the increased tariff. Well, NTA Abuja asked a very pertinent question. The tariff increase controversy, to be or not to be? Let's see the answer.
The public monopoly of the Nigerian Electric Power Authority was unbundled with the creation of Electricity Power Sector Reform Act 2005, which created opportunities for private sector players to engage in power generation and distribution. In recent times, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NEC, was alleged to have proposed an increment of electricity tariffs, which is faced with a lot of controversy, as it was learnt that 11 power distribution companies have gotten approval to slightly increase electricity tariff from September 1st, 2020.
There is no time that an increment is palatable. The only thing that is palatable at any point in time is a downward review of the cost of anything. If there has been a shift, an upward review in the cost of production, and you are not allowed to recover even your cost of production, let alone to talk about profit, who is going to pay the difference? And because you also get some of the components you used in generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity offshore from outside the country, therefore means that the cost of dollar will necessarily influence the cost of production. That's one. Two, most of our power stations are also gas-fired power station, and gas is denominated in dollars. So, and that's a major component. And of course, we know that the level of inflation in the country today is something that is also attracting attention.
In the face of economic challenges the country is presently witnessing, many believe that the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NEC, has chosen an inappropriate timing to introduce these new measures as the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected the Nigerian economy.
There is no reason to increase electricity tariff. The services must be commensurate with the price before you talk of increment, isn't it? We don't have steady light for now. The meters are just going round, and they say they are stopping it almost, it's about being stopped, and it has not gotten far, you know. So the thing is, we need to do the right thing at the right time.
We heard about the proposed increment tariff. So far, they want to increase the NEPA bill. It's unfortunate that we are not even getting the service we want. And you're talking about increment. The light comes once in a while. And when they want to bring the light, they don't bring the light in the business hour. They bring it at the close hours of the business. So what do they have to do with the light any longer?
What I see there is that there is nothing bad about it, but the only problem is this: if there will be electricity regularly and they increase the tariff, is not a problem. You can't be paying for what you don't see.
So an ordinary Nigerian is not a welcome idea, to be frank, because if we can get utility from what we are driving on, then we won't have so many problems. You know that we Nigerians, we are quick to adapt to so many situations, and we're quick to forget and forge ahead. But this increment for now, as you can see this shop, the place is dark. There is no light.
Although the regulation did not state when the new electricity tariff would be executed, the question still on every Nigerian's lips is, how many people can afford the cost if the alleged proposed increment is truly implemented?
All right, so increments, to be or not to be, it's a question that a lot of people will have a debate on for a very long time. But what I picked from there is, whatever happens, Nigerians want to see light. Give it to us, and then we pay whatever you ask us to pay. Talking about payment, it's about time we paid some bill. And while we do that, I munch on my banana. All right, we're going to Abuja right about now, and that's Ondo State. We know Ogun State, sorry. We know that the people there are very hard-working people. But to get the job done, you also need a bit of, enhancement. Talk about power. Let's find out what is happening. State of power in there.
The issue of estimated billing, otherwise called crazy billing, is a major among challenges bedeviling power supply in Nigeria. In its determination to resolve these impairs and ensure sanity in the power sector, the federal government introduced prepaid meters, among other policies, to ensure adequate power supply in Nigeria. In Ogun State, for instance, the exercise is continuous. Some areas have already been metered, while some have only been enumerated for metering. Investigations, however, reveal that only about 20% of electricity consumers have been metered so far in Ogun State.
We keep adding new customers on a daily basis. The meters available, they're very few. And sometimes we have issue of supply from our MAP, that's the meter asset providers. So this is a challenge for us. But I know with the National Mass Metering Program and all the previous schemes that were used to improve metering, they've actually helped.
It is not again saying that the distribution of prepaid meters in some areas in Ogun State had resolved the issue of estimated billing completely in such areas. However, the issue of outstanding accumulated bill resulting from the estimated billing system is yet to be resolved, according to some consumers.
Actually, the thing is good for some people that are residential. At least when they are not at home, they will off it. When they are in, they want it. But we that are using it for business, maybe they should come and inspect what we are using. If you are using for fridge, this is the amount you are going to pay. This meter is not good for business at all because of the outrageous bill. If there's anything the government can help us to do concerning us that are using it for commercial purpose, we really appreciate that.
So now that we stop paying, they have given us meter. They now spread the outstanding, which they say is 500,000. They now spread on the meter. So every month they'll be removing 10,000 every week, every month for the meter before you can have any energy for yourself to use.
Now, what we have also discovered is many of those complaints in those days was because meter was not available to really measure what they were using. Now that they have been metered, we have seen that it has fallen to our own favor because the so-called estimated that was high is now under. And customers are now beginning to, in fact, you hear some people saying that the meter is running because these things are standard meters and they've already been calibrated under a standard environment.
While government intensifies efforts at improving power generation, transmission and distribution, all stakeholders must synergize to ensure all households in the country is metered. This will not only completely resolve estimated billing problem, but also bring about serenity in the power sector.
All right, we're still talking metering, power, electricity, whatever it is. But let's go straight to Sokoto and get to find out the state of mass metering in that state.
Generations of Nigerians have grown up and live with the hope of one day having that stable power supply that we all know can impact us positively. A hope and dream that becomes more frustrated each passing day. In spite of billions being pumped into the power sector, Nigerians are still grappling with unstable power supply. One of the major efforts of government to tackle this has been the mass metering of every household and business to enhance payment discipline.
I have 35,000 active customers, out of which we have not less than like 7,000 that are metered. Looking at the mass population of the state, Kaduna itself, how many months will it take for them to cover each and every house or houses or household in Kaduna to meter all of them before they will now move to the local governments around? Zaria itself is another state, then Zamfara. And I know last year, early this year, MD has launched the metering, national mass metering in Kebbi. So they are coming from Kaduna, after Kaduna, Zaria, Gusau, then Sokoto.
With metering comes estimated billings, and this is where a number of consumers log heads with the power distribution companies.
No improvement on light. You can spend 3 days or 4 days without light. If you come in within our environment right now, a lot of people doesn't pay the money because of it's unacceptable, because we doesn't have light and they used to collect money.
But in spite of how consumers feel about their estimated billings or how crazy they think the charges are, there is a method to the madness.
We take the load assessment based on the facilities you have. Those facilities all together, if you can maybe view this the template, we take the load pace by pace. It will now translate into the kilowatt based on your load that you are going to take, times the total number of hours given to that feeder, times the total number of days in a month. We arrived at the amount we are going to charge you in Naira and Kobo.
One thing is clear, that if power is supplied adequately, consumers need to trust in the process and pay what they consume.
All right, it's still Weekend Deal, and I have with me in the studio someone that is more or less, you can describe him as the mouthpiece of a lot of people. He is a convener of the Electric Power Consumer Rights and Policy Advocacy, and his name is Adetayo Adegbemle. Thank you for coming on the show.
Good morning.
All right, when I saw your advocacy, I was happy because I know a lot of Nigerians are asking questions that you want to answer. But let me start by asking, how has it been with this advocacy?
Well, it's been very interesting. I mean, because you meet different challenges every day. You see people that have complaints and nobody is ready to answer them. You see, and in fact, by the time we started this advocacy body, Power Up Nigeria, it was a period where nobody knew what was happening in the power sector. Nobody, I mean, there was no, from the government angle, from the regulatory angle, even the private people that took over in 2013, nobody was ready to come up. Well, I don't know, maybe they were confused initially. But, because if you recall, I think they took over in November 2013. Mm-hmm. Immediately after November 2013, one of the first rumor that went out was, we have new people that are in charge, all the old debts has been cancelled, government has paid, so, consumers can be using light, So, I mean, that created a big problem even at the outset, Then again, I don't know why, but I'll keep saying this. Not many Nigerians have taken interest in what is happening in the power sector, which is why I really appreciate it. When I heard about this program, I was highly impressed myself. Like, yes, good. This is what we're talking about. We need more of this kind of programs, So, yes, we also have challenges with the policies in the power sector. We're coming from an era of NEPA, where anything NEPA does was the law, right? To now to a regulated environment where
you cannot sue anybody.
You can sue, you can raise issues. There are private people, entities running the system. Like one of the things that I also knew as part of the major challenge was one, we still have communities contributing money to go and buy transformers. Mm-hmm. I keep asking, will you buy, because you have the money, will you buy an ATM for a bank in your area because you think they needed it? You will not do that. So why are you buying transformers for discos? So now this also boils down to information.
If a community buys transformer, can they actually take up the rights and probably ask them to start?
There's actually a provision in the Electric Power Sector Reform Act that says that if you're going to invest in any network, this is how the operators of the network should pay you back.
Gradually deduct your money.
Yes, but again, you see, your first question you asked was, what have been the experience? Mm-hmm. Now, I'll also speak to this. The same way we have problem with the policies, the same way we have problem with, even some government attitude to the power sector, the same way we have problem with the private sectors also trying to game the system.
Sometimes, like you said, before you point accusing finger,
make sure that
do
your
own
home is
bits
clean first.
and do your own very well. But still pointing at accusing finger, a lot of questions that came in, if I group them in one, it's estimated billing,
yes,
no meter and all of that. I want to advise that at every given point in time, you should be able to speak to Nigerians just as you've come here, because there are a lot of things I didn't know how to give situation reports and movement report to DISCO. Every day we learn, Sha. We've been speaking with the convener, Electric Power Consumer Rights and Policy Advocates, Adetayo Adegbemle. Thank you for coming. And now we join Lina Obi to get to find out alternative power supply, the way to go.
Adequate power supply is an unavoidable prerequisite to any nation's development, an essential part of modern life for lighting, heating, cooling, refrigeration, and for operating appliances. What alternative power supply is available as a stopgap solution in resolving the power supply issue?
In the case of Nigeria, we had predominantly relied on grid extensions over the years. But of late, because of the emergence of renewable energies, particularly solar.
This sustainable energy is divided into two. We have renewable and non-renewable energy. Majority of this renewable energy are what will sustain us in Nigeria. Let's say, for instance, the solar energy, the hydro energy, which is in existence, and wind energy. We also have geothermal and we have biomass. I believe that this energy, if integrated and with good facilities and with good financial capacity, we can harness them and make use of them in Nigeria.
With the level of sun in this country, how can we maintain power supply?
The solar itself is measured by way of the intensity of the solar radiation and the number of hours of sunshine in a day.
With the good facilities and with good management and with good environment, what does it entail? It entails non-emission of gas, having 24 hours power supply on grid and even off grid, because it can be stored also.
How prepared are we for this renewable energy?
I'm working on a project using solar panel to fuse into students' school bag so as to enable them read after school hours. And the only way I could contribute is to find a way to add technology, because I make school bags so that children can read at home with this new technology, and that is the solar.
So solar energy is okay, just like you put part of your salary in the bank, for any day. Solar should be something like that.
I've seen a lot of people, private individuals, using solar in their houses and all that. I think it's a very good alternative, so to say.
If the solar system is available and people are seeing light and you are paying for it and you are getting the services, it will be okay.
Is it cost effective?
Yes, it's affordable in many cases. Why? Because if you check the bill or the bill you are paying in a year, if you invest it on solar, you know that you are gaining.
Solar has recently become the cheapest source of electricity when you compared it with any other source. Numbers coming out of many countries, including Dubai, Saudi Arabia, countries that are doing mega scale solar, prices are coming in the sub $2 cent, which means they are half the price we are buying the cheapest power today in Nigeria.
Is there any policy for energy growth in Nigeria?
We have an electricity vision 30-30-30. This is an electricity vision to have at least 30,000 megawatt of on-grid generation capacity by the year 2030, with at least 30% of that coming from renewable energy.
The real potential of power supply lies not in providing social amenities, but in stimulating long-term economic development.
So before we finally round up on electricity, we'll be visiting Lagos to get to find out vandalism and the state of things there. Precisely Channel 10 packaged this.
Electricity in Nigeria is generated
through thermal and hydropower sources and fossil fuels. Gas accounts for 86% of the capacity. With the 23 power generating plants connected to the national grid with the capacity to generate 11,165.4 megawatts of electricity, it is still inadequate to meet the demand of households and businesses. But it is unfortunate that as a nation, Nigeria remains burdened with the quest for improved and steady power supply because there are unpatriotic elements who are bent on sabotaging government efforts and throwing their fellow citizens into hardship.
We didn't have light for some time. What's the cause? We can't actually know, but at times they told us that whether the cable is being stolen or maybe there's all this wind blowing and the pole fell down, one thing or the other.
They are giving us crazy bills and it doesn't justify what the consumers are paying for. That's the reason. And out of the anger, they go ahead to do something like that. That's not good enough all the same, but that's just the way they can express themselves.
As the nation continues to grapple with persistent power outage and unreliable electricity supply, the power sector is currently beset by the twin problems of theft and vandalism of its transformers and power line cables. This frightening part of the act of vandalism and theft has cost the power sector billions of naira in repairs and replacements.
These cables actually cost lots of money. One of the upriser cables, a meter can cost up to 30,000 a meter. So you are talking about several millions that you have to actually use in replace if you are to replace all the substations that are being vandalized within a period.
The act, which has continued from the late 1990s, is responsible for over 60% of blackouts recorded across the country. This consequently results in intermittent service delivery.
Some community stays out of darkness stay in darkness for 2, 3, 4 months, some even up to 1 year. Businesses are equally shut down. You have some small-scale businesses like barbers, people that use it for welders, and some other things that use these things. Those ones are equally out of business.
While we lament this deplorable situation, it is noteworthy that the menace of electricity equipment vandals persists because of the existence of a market for the stolen equipment and items.
The markets are everywhere. You go to some of these international markets around, you see those things openly sold. And so the market is there. So there have to be a stiffer punishment for those that are involved in these things, the people that buy it, and the people that actually do the stealing themselves.
As Nigerians yearn daily for improved and steady power supply, more needs to be done to curb the menace of power equipment theft and vandalism.
The community, first and foremost, is taking responsibility, taking ownership of those substations, knowing that the substations belong to them. There are laws governing all these things, but even if it means enacting a stiffer law by the National Assembly that makes the penalty for this thing to be more stiffer.
For our best interest as citizens, we must protect these vital assets of the nation from the grip of criminals and vandals.
Whatever is worth, let's try to live an upright life, and then try to conserve your light in your house. What do I mean? Yesterday we gave you tips. From scratch, as you're building, ensure that you build with a good engineer, electrical engineer, and turn off your lights as you leave your house. In a little while, I'll be switching off the lights in the studio. And yes, I learned something today. When you're traveling, even if it's for a weekend, please write to your disco. Bye.